There are people in the ocean. No, really, it's true. Not mermaids, none of that magical stuff, just people. Regular people. People like you and me, but they're in the ocean, not on land. Okay, I know, it's hard to believe, but quit interrupting me and just listen. There are people in the ocean. And sometimes on low tide you can see them. Barely. But they're there. The tops of their heads bob with the dips of the waves, and you could tell that they're standing because they move from the force of the sea. The strands of hair float up with the water, and very rarely, you might see their face. But they just stand there, not moving. About 10 or 20 of them off the shoreline. I thought that maybe the people in the ocean would move, so I camped on the beach. I know it's illegal, but some things are worth a night in jail and a fine. I didn't sleep all night, just watched. Watched them watching me. And sometimes pieces of hair washed ashore, or a fingernail, subtle signs of a human being. I thought about collecting them for DNA testing, but why would I do that? I know where that person is. They're standing out in the ocean, looking at the shore. Looking at me. At us. I called out to them eventually, and then when I got no response, I started cussing at them, and then calling them all sorts of mean and nasty things, and they didn't say or do anything, and I broke down and cried. Just go and look. There are people in the ocean. But you have to go at a low tide. I don't know how they stand on the rocks and the shells there without cutting their feet. I don't know how they breathe or how they don't float away, but they are there, and you can see them. Yes, I did tell somebody. Well, I'm telling somebody. I'm telling you right now. I've told people before, and they don't believe me, but God, you can see it. You can see them. And I know they can see us. They can see us even though the seaweed wraps around their heads sometimes, and they stare for thousands of feet, yards, miles, and you know they aren't looking at you, but they are looking at you. Do you understand? No? I did try to swim out to them. Eventually. After a week or so. I tried to put the people out of my mind and go on with my life, but they were still there with their blank expressions and their pruned skin, staring through and into the men who surfed the waves above them, the children who ran from each wave, and the parents who tried to coax the kids into the waters. Maybe those kids know something that we don't. I don't want to get into the water anymore now that I see those people who see me. Well, I swam out to them. I wrote a will beforehand because I thought that they might try to drown me, but no. Their eyes just followed me until I passed their line of sight. Then straight back to the shore, to the people who saw me but not them. Somebody on the shoreline shouted and asked if I needed help, but I just stared. Stared at the people watching me now. Watching the hyperventilating girl treading water among tens of bobbing heads. But they didn't seem worried about the heads or the bodies those heads were attached to. Just the regular girl. I took a deep breath and dove. Despite the strangeness of the ocean people, there was still marine life. Fish swam through arms that slightly floated and between legs. There was a hermit crab that was crawling on the chest of someone. I even saw some barnacles on people that had been in the water for apparently a long time. But do you know what else I saw? More people. More and more and more and more people. An ocean of ocean people. A veritable field. The deeper I looked, the more people I saw, until the water itself blocked my vision. All staring, all looking at me, at us, at land. I swam down, following the gentle slope of the continent until I started dropping dramatically. By this point, I went up for air and then back down again to look at them. Most of them were covered by the living grime that seas deposit, so much so that I could barely see any discerning features except their eyes, which still moved and watched me. What did I do? What could I do? I couldn't dive any deeper, not without professional gear. I had looked and called out and done everything except interact with them. I swam down. I hesitated. My breath was running out. I'd been swimming for far too long. I still could ignore this. I could go home and sleep for 1,000 years. I could drug myself into a state where I would never see the ocean people's eyes again. I could drive far away, move to the mountains, live in a van, and pretend that I don't see them watching me from lakes now, and ponds, and creeks, and streams, puddles, glasses of water. I could do that. I reached out and grabbed the closest one to me. And immediately, I recognized that person in the ocean who had only been watching me with their eyes, who hadn't moved a muscle, and was so calcified as to be a functional statue. It was me. I don't know how I got out or how I was found. I ended up in a hospital somewhere 30 miles away from the shoreline. I think I drowned. Maybe I'm still drowning. You don't believe me. That's okay. Most people don't. I didn't expect you to. But if you ever find yourself with some time and it's a low tide, you should go to the beach. Maybe you'll see them. Maybe you won't. If you don't see them, hooray! You should be glad for that. If you do, well, just be careful is all. There are people in the ocean, you know.